The Eastern Conference Final in the NBA is going to a seventh game. The Miami Heat coming up with a huge victory over the Boston Celtics, 111-103, and what a performance from Jimmy Butler. 47 points tonight. Kyle Lowry also showing up, 18 points for him. That is a playoff high. Max Strus as well, 13 points, and P.J. Tucker, 11 points as the Heat force a Game 7. This series is now tied at 3 games apiece. Game 7, Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time in Miami. Let's talk about this result with our NBA writer, Colin Ward-Henninger. Colin, I mean, in the pregame you said Butler would have to go off for 45 points or so in order for the Heat to win this game. He goes for 47. He must have heard you. I mean, what's your reaction? A huge performance from Butler in the Heat tonight.
What else there is to say? This guy was hobbled last game. He wasn't moving right. He was shooting air balls on mid-range jumpers, and he came out just from the tip absolutely motivated to get to the rim, to get his points. He was looking for a shot early, which he had to do. He didn't have time to try to get his teammates involved. So he had a tremendous first quarter, really set the tone, made the Boston Celtics defense collapse on him, which created open looks for three-pointers, and Max Strus finally made some. Kyle Lowry was phenomenal. He finally made some three-pointers, but it all stemmed from Jimmy Butler being aggressive from the start. It was an absolutely phenomenal performance, and you can just put this on the ledger of Jimmy Butler's career in terms of his clutch performances when his team needs him the most.
And I guess the question now is, can he do it for another game? Because you'd have to think that in that Game 7, they're going to need Butler again to be influential. But, I mean, how good is it for Miami in terms of the psyche to have Lowry, Max Strus, and you may possibly have Tyler Hero back for Game 7 as well. But to have Strus and Lowry performing in this game as well, how big is that for the Heat, even though they did manage to foul out?
Oh, the Heat have to be supremely confident. I mean, heading home for a Game 7, they prove that they are the more resilient, more experienced, more clutch team in this Game 6. It was apparent down the stretch that Miami was much more comfortable in a close game, in a must-win game, an elimination game. So heading back home with the way that Lowry performed, as you mentioned, with the way that Max Strus is finally knocking down some shots, they have to be so confident heading back to Miami. I think that Eric Spoelstra, one of the most underrated coaches in the NBA, what he continues to do year in and year out, even with this roster that's been missing guys left and right during the playoffs, what he's been able to do is phenomenal. And I think that with him and with Jimmy Butler and Lowry, a proven champion, Miami has to be really confident heading into Game 7.
Miami forcing that Game 7. Just to put into context, Butler's performance, 47 points from him. P.J. Tucker, Lowry, and Strus, the 3 next highest scorers on the Heat, had 42 points combined. So a huge performance from Butler. Let's talk about the Celtics then. I mean, we talked about the fact that they've blown 3-2 series leads before. They did it against the Cavaliers, a big game from LeBron James back in 2012. So for the Celtics, how much damage does this loss do for them psychologically, knowing that 3-2 blown lead thing is something that's kind of hung over them?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be thinking about blown 3-2 leads. I think they're going to be thinking about blowing this game. And they really did not perform well down the stretch. This is a Celtics team that most of their wins have been blowouts. They played 3 clutch minutes in this series before this game, and they did not look good down the stretch. They looked disorganized. Jason Tatum was turning the ball over. Jaylen Brown missed 2 clutch free throws, and then Jimmy Butler came down the very next play and got a 3-point play. It was a huge swing. They did not look like a team ready to play against a seasoned veteran team like Miami down the stretch. So those are the things that Ime Udoka is going to have to talk with his team about. Remember, this is a young group. Their best players are in their mid-20s. So it's not easy for them to suddenly just summon this clutch gene, whatever you want to call it. So heading into Game 7, I think we're really going to see what these young guys are made of and what adjustments Ime Udoka can make if Jimmy Butler is going to be the Jimmy Butler that we saw in Game 6.
Obviously, this line is going to change, but the early line, Colin, has the Celtics favored by 2.5. What do you think?
I would stay away from that, man. I would go with the Miami Heat. I know I originally picked the Celtics in 6, but after seeing what the Heat did with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, I am surprised that the Miami Heat wouldn't be favored at home. I mean, I get this, the Celtics are on paper the more talented team, but what we just saw from the Heat and with Tyler Hero potentially coming back, I think I would go with the Heat heading into Game 7.
So when you're looking at Game 7 now, I mean, what kind of game are you expecting? Because this was, I mean, we've seen blowout games for most of this series. We haven't had a game decided by less than 6 points. That goes tonight, 8-point difference between the two teams. So what kind of a game are you expecting on Sunday?
It's going to be a bloodbath. This whole series has been incredibly physical. It was again tonight. They were, hitting each other, falling down. Jimmy Butler's coming up limping. Kyle Lowry's coming up limping. People are on the floor the whole game. I would expect the same thing in Game 7. These teams at this point, as we see in most Game 7s, they know each other so well. The scouting reports could basically go out the window because everyone knows each other's plays. It really comes down to what we saw in Game 6. Which is whose superstars are going to step up and whose role players are going to be able to make shots. Now, Derek White was phenomenal for the Boston Celtics tonight. We haven't talked about him yet. So they're going to need either him or another one of those role players to step up again in Miami for Game 7 because, as we all know, role players tend to play better at home. So I think the Heat's role players are going to be ready to go. And with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry leading the charge, it's going to be a tough task for Boston.
And the potential return of Tyler Hero White, 22 points, second leading scorer on the Celtics tonight behind Jason Tatum. If you're the Golden State Warriors and you're watching this series, obviously you have to be happy to see it go 7 games. And as you mentioned, you're expecting to see a bloodbath in Game 7 on Sunday. But if you are the Warriors watching this series, I mean, what's your takeaway at this point?
I don't think they want to play either of these teams. Coming out of, playing against Denver and Memphis without John Morant and Dallas with basically Luka Doncic and a bunch of role players, this is going to be a rude awakening for them in Game 1 when they face a defense that's physical and intense as either of these teams. They're certainly going to be happy that they have more rest than the team that comes out of the East, but that can work against you as well, as we've seen in the past. Whichever team wins this Game 7 is going to be on a high, is going to be used to playing these intense physical games that I'm not sure Golden State is used to based on their opponents in the Western Conference thus far. They will have fresh legs, which I'm sure they're going to be happy about. But coming into this NBA Finals, they're certainly going to be hit with a punch on defense from one of these teams.
NBA writer Colin Ward-Henninger joining us tonight to talk about the Miami Heat forcing Game 7 versus the Boston Celtics. It comes your way Sunday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks, Colin.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.